Hi, I'm Shana Meyerson with the Yoga War podcast, here today with fitness influencer and pro-Israel advocate, Jordan Syatt. If you appreciate and find value in these important discussions, please consider supporting the show so I can continue to bring you such amazing and esteemed guests. Detailed are pinned in the comments below. So today I'm doing something a bit different for this podcast, a peer-to-peer discussion between two pro-Israel and, yes, Jewish fitness influencers who have leveraged our social media platforms to defend the Jewish people and the Jewish state. And we've both endured reprehensible online abuse for doing so. Jordan has a very unique, objective approach to health and fitness, and he brings that same fact-based relatability to his conversations about Israel. As a fitness coach, he personally tests hypotheses instead of relying on other people's conclusions. And as an Israel advocate, he speaks from both knowledge and experience to remove as much personal bias as possible. Anyway, according to Jordan, he's just a regular guy, nothing special or unique or extravagant. While most people create content to try to make themselves appear larger than life, Jordan Syatt goes out of his way to remind everyone he's a normal person, just like you and me. He created his online fitness business from his dorm room at the University of Delaware in 2011 because he wanted to help people achieve their fitness goals. He's been coaching people since he was 14, and it's all he's wanted to do since. He's not in this for the money or fame or legacy. He just wants to help people, and he does. He's a father to a beautiful little girl and a husband to an extraordinary wife. And so this nice Jewish boy is off the market. I just want to, I imagine that's why it's in his bio. Thank you so much for joining me, Jordan. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, to start out the conversation, I'd love to draw sort of the bigger picture of who you are beyond just a regular guy and a brilliant and inspiring fitness expert. So, to start off, can you tell us about your relationship to Israel and what makes you feel so connected to the land?
Yeah, I mean, so the first time I went, I was 16. It was just like a 10-day trip with a youth group, and I immediately fell in love. Um, it's funny. So it was this 10-day trip, and I was put up with a host family for a few of the days in Haifa. And before I went to Israel, I had many preconceived notions and thoughts about it. What was it going to be like everybody does. And even it's not just Israel, like you anywhere in the world, even within the United States, you have preconceived notions about a place where you're going, right? So I had my own thoughts and I was like, oh, the Jewish state, everyone's going to be very religious. And I get into this host family house. They have 5 kids. And I walk in and the two youngest girls, they run up to me and they're very excited to practice their English. And the first thing they ask is, are you kosher? And I immediately get nervous because I don't keep kosher. I've actually become more religious, especially over the last year, but at that point in time, not kosher at all. And I almost lied. I almost said yes just because I was so nervous and I didn't want to be disappoint them. And when I was like, no, I don't keep kosher, these two little girls cheered. They were like, yes. They were so worried that they were gonna have to keep kosher while I was at the house. And I was taken aback. I was like, that's so crazy. I thought that everyone was gonna be very religious. And um only actually a relatively small percentage of people are actually the majority are more secular in Israel. But anyway, it was an amazing experience. I fell in love with it. And it was a unique time because I was terrible in school and I didn't actually want to go to college. So my rabbi, he said, you know, you could take a year off and spend a year in Israel. and I had no idea how that was possible, and I didn't have my family. I didn't grow up with money, so after talks with my mom, my rabbi, he ended up starting an anonymous a fund for an anonymous student at our synagogue to fund a year abroad in a Shnat Sharut program, like a volunteering program in Israel, and I was the anonymous student, and my trip was fully funded by my synagogue, which was just one of the most amazing things in the world. Like I couldn't have afforded it otherwise. And that's when I was volunteering with underprivileged youth in Bat Yam, and I was teaching English. And then I lived in Arad, this like the cliche version of what people think of Israel, the Middle East, like just the desert. I worked on Masada for 3 months. I lived in Jerusalem for 3 months. I volunteered with Holocaust survivors. Like it was the most amazing year of my life. And I wanted to join the IDF. I had promised my mom I would come back and go to school, and she told me, if you don't come back and go to school, I'm going to kill you. And I don't really have a relationship with my father, and I didn't want to risk losing that with my mom, so I came back to the United States, went to school, and over the summers I would actually be like a tour guide, and I would help lead youth trips to Poland and Auschwitz, and then go to Israel. And I just kept building and building and building this love for Israel and understanding of it. Um, and then after college, by the time I graduated, I had an online business, an online fitness business, and I realized like I don't have to be anywhere. So I moved back to Israel, and I lived in Tel Aviv, and I was going to Ulpan, and I was just studying and having fun and enjoying life in Israel. And then I ended up getting a job opportunity in New York City. So I left. And since then, I've taken my wife there. I've taken my firstborn daughter there. We just had our second daughter recently. And so she hasn't been yet. But it's Israel is I very much consider it my home. We want to make Aliyah one day. And there are so many reasons. I'm sure we'll talk all about it, but like it's my home, and it's the greatest place in the world for me.
Well, mazel tov on the second baby. That
Thank
was
you. Thank you.
so that's wonderful. I do think I agree with you that Israel, particularly Tel Aviv, is so many things that nobody expects. It's impossible not to fall in love with the country. I truly believe it's impossible, and that all the people who propagating lies all over the world about Israel, it's obviously because they haven't never been there. All you have to do is
Correct.
one day in Tel Aviv, and all of a sudden the thought of apartheid is like, what?
Yes. It makes no sense. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's only people who've never actually been there. As soon as you land, you see Arabic, you see English. It's like you see people in the airport praying, like Muslims praying in the airport. It's like they have prayer rooms for Muslims. They have prayer rooms for Jews. It's like everybody is welcome there. Um, and as long as you're a citizen, you have full rights, just like every other sovereign nation. If you are a citizen, then you have rights. And
Unless, let me interject, it's an Arab nation, in which case,
correct.
if there were a Jew, which there isn't, I think there's three in Syria, for example, you're a dhimmi, you're a second class.
Correct.
Israel is actually the only country, ironically, in the entire Middle East that has equal rights for all of its citizens. But what happens is these lies get so ludicrous that to contend them sounds stupid. But I want to get more into you, and then I want to get
Yeah.
into like the discussion about Israel. So, because you touched upon like quite a few different things, let's talk about so you said you weren't kosher, and you've gotten more religious, and I have to agree, and I find that a lot of um definitely the pro-Israel community, but also Jews in general, me definitely have had that same sort of basic ascension back to our Judaism, back to our roots. And like you, I mean, I literally am like in the process of figuring out like how can I make Aliyah. My soul lives there. I've been back twice since 10/7. Have you been back yet?
I haven't, just because my wife was pregnant, and like it's been a very crazy year with in my house.
Sure.
I want to, and we are hopefully within the next year, but it's been a crazy year. Never mind 10/7, but yeah, it's been tough.
It's a whole new experience right now. And you mentioned Ben Gurion. I mean, you get to the airport, I'm sure you've seen, but as you know, they have those long like walkway, I don't, like the long diagonal ramp thing. And I'm sure you've seen online, but on both sides of this ramp are like every single hostage poster,
Yeah.
and people write notes and leave things. And it's like, so again, I've been there twice this year, once on a mission to see all, the sites of the South, which is devastating. We all, as many of us as possible, need to bear witness, and once to volunteer for a week. But as you leave, I mean, every time I leave Israel, I leave a piece of my soul anyway. But the hostage posters
Mhm.
make it so much more personal that I don't know how to say this because it's not like Israel needs me, but I feel like I'm abandoning my people when I walk out of that airport.
I I love that you said that. Um, I I think you articulated it better than I ever could. I've left Israel in amazing times of relative peace, and I felt the same way. And I couldn't imagine leaving. I would imagine the arriving there also felt a heightened sense of happiness and joy and emotion overall for you. Like, I'm back, I'm here for the people, I'm here to help overall. And then leaving, you almost feel like you're abandoning them. um so yeah, I mean, I that makes total sense. I think you articulated that in a way that I wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, I think that joy is because I've been there about 25, 30 times. I've been there a lot, just as an adult. And I think joy is exactly how I would normally describe my trips there. Now the feelings are so complex. Because yes, there's I don't know about you, Jordan. Like, I literally, this is such a weird thing for me to say because it's not typical of like anything but Israel. I want to kiss the ground. Like, I want to kiss the ground when I get there. It feels like home. Not that America doesn't. I am like such a proud American. Don't get me wrong, but there's a place where your body lives and there's a place where your soul lives.
Correct.
But going back now, it's hard to classify as joy. There's a strength and a resilience and a power and a strength and a spiritual energy that is so uplifting. But again, the hostages, I just can't get past, not just the hostages, the hostage families, and a whole entire nation that has been traumatized
Yep.
by the attacks, by the hostages, by the soldiers. Like, if your child is at war or God forbid loses his or her life in the war, the levels upon levels and layers upon layers of strength and brokenness that are simultaneously existing. This is why I would say, I know you have a brand new baby. To get there, I don't even know how to say this like in like a appropriate way, but before it's
Yeah.
cleaned up,
Yeah.
because to go to Bailey and see, like a child's push toy in the middle of the burnt wreckage and everything broken, and as you probably know, there's zero blood because of Zaka. I mean,
Yeah.
every drop of blood is gone. Um, but they have to rebuild, right? I mean, they have to. That's their world, and it's part of Israel to bounce back. We are not defined as victims. We are defined as survivors, and like just a miraculous story told through the ages, right? We always rise from the ashes.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you think about the history, and it's actually been really wonderful because I've been pretty outspoken on social media, and anyone who I think is just rabidly anti-Semitic has unfollowed me by this point, or some of them still do, just like to interact, but most of them have left. And what's left are people who are either very much in support or people who are more diplomatic and they just want to learn. And I've been getting a lot of questions around why has there been so much hate historically towards Jews? Like, where does this come from? And if you look at any other nation of people who have been persecuted, like for us to be able to still be around thousands and thousands and thousands of years, time and time and time again, of expulsions and exterminations, time and again, it's a miracle. It's a legitimate miracle. And I think that's also why post 10/7 we also, especially in the diaspora, we see a rise of religion and a rise of coming back to our Judaism, and because we see how easy it is to lose it, and I think it's really important for us to come back to it.
Yeah, it's funny, not funny, but in my conversation with Rabbi Wolpe, the way that he explained it, that I haven't heard, because there's so many theories about, why anti-Semitism. But one that he said about modern anti-Semitism that was really interesting is we're so powerful, we're easy to hate, but we're also so tiny that we're easy to pick on.
Yeah, it's
And we're
true.
such an easy scapegoat because it's like, yes, everything about success and religion and overcoming the odds and morality, all the things that threaten people's sense of self, we represent. And also we're 16 million people on earth, 1/6. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, well, I mean, especially in the days of social media, right? Like you've got billions of people on social media. And if every Jew were to speak up, which by the way, we could talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
There's no way for us to out speak the haters. But so let me go back to the Judaism thing because you did mention A, you weren't kosher, and B, that you find yourself more connected to Judaism. I hate to use the word religious because everyone has different definitions of religious since 10/7. So let's talk about Judaism to start out on a scale of Jewish to super Jew. Where do you fall on this scale? We'll call Jewish a 1 and super Jew a 10.
It's sort of difficult because, well, I'll say this, and I know you and I are probably in agreement. A Jew is a Jew, right? Like just like a Jew is a Jew, regardless of whether they are very observant or not. A Jew is a Jew, and I mean, we need to only look at 10/7, the Holocaust, whatever, to realize like they don't care if you're religious or not. If you're Jewish, you're Jewish. So I don't think someone is more or less Jew based on how observant they are. My observance has gone up, and I would say before, like at my lowest level of observance, I was like really only going to on the high holidays to synagogue and not observing Shabbat, and it was really just high holiday Jewish is probably what it was. And then over as I've gotten older, once I got married, marriage was like a big step in that direction. Like had a Jewish marriage, married a Jewish woman, and then from there, having my first daughter, she had her naming ceremony. Every step along the way, it's gone more. So we start celebrating Shabbat every weekend, and we start not having not non-kosher meats in the house, and there's like little bits here and there. And then ever since around a little bit before 10/7 is when I started wrapping tefillin every morning, and so reading whether it's Torah study, whether it's actual studying the Torah, whether it's reading the Tanya, going to Chabad. So at this point, if I had to put a number on it, I don't know, maybe like a 6 or a 7. I think I can always be doing better. Sometimes I wear my seat. Sometimes I don't wear my seat. It's like there are some mornings where I only say the Shema and I don't wrap tefillin because I'm a little bit busy. And in that case, I'm like I wasn't as dedicated this morning as I should have been, and then I have like guilt over that. But I mean, I think relative to Jews is in the diaspora, I think I'm pretty observant, but I'm not Orthodox yet.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting that you say yet. I think that the yet in my life, like, is limited to if I ever were to meet an Orthodox man, I would consider becoming Orthodox. But I have to say, like the last 3 weeks, this is super new. I'm like trying on Shabbat, not like real Shabbat. Like I'll still drive because like I drive to synagogue, but like not working. Normally, like Shabbat is like a full on work day to me. Like every day, I'm like, let's just try this one little piece of a piece. But it's interesting because I would say you put yourself as 6 or 7, I guess, is the same way you consider yourself a regular guy because you're a really regular guy. I think, especially in relation to most diaspora Jews in America, we can't really say diaspora because outside of America, there are no Reformed Jews. Everybody is Orthodox. But at an American scale, I'd say you're probably up there 8 or 9, the way that you're describing things. And by the way, do you ever have these weird flashbacks? Something that is so irrelevant in your life, and suddenly you're like, oh my goodness, I did not say Shema this morning. When you said that, I'm like, I always say it. That's so weird. But it's like press like this rewind button. I'm like, what happened? I always say,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, just because it's like, I love the concept of the last words that I say before I go to bed, and the first words that I say when I wake up is thank you, God, for this life,
Correct. Yeah.
and we are so blessed. So it sounds like 10-7 it did change your relationship to Judaism to an extent. Would you say that it has in any way changed or complicated your relationship with God?
That's a really good question. I have a very complicated relationship with God. I think even realistically, and this is something I've spent a significant amount of time on, Israel means like to wrestle with God. Like that's what Israel means, like to wrestle with God. And I think that lesson alone has taken up a tremendous amount of head, heart, and soul space over the last year plus. And I think it will for my whole life because there's a lot of wrestling going on. There's a lot of like, what's right? Like, there's been a lot of how could this happen? Why could this happen? But it's really interesting. Even if we look at people say, unfortunately, I've said it way too many times over the last year is Baruch Dayan Hamet,
Right.
which is one of the things you say if someone dies. I remember when I first learned what that meant, it really took me by surprise. It's not about the person who died. It's about God. When someone dies, you say, blessed be the true judge, which, and I forget which rabbi, I've been listening to so many rabbinical podcasts and Torah studies recently. One of them said something very interesting recently, which was to the effect of sometimes God might put someone on this earth to make one person's day better. That could literally be why one person's purpose, just to be here to make one person's day better. And with that being said, to come back around, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Like, my relationship with God is a constant struggle, and my comfort comes from knowing that's what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be an easier relationship. It's literally the name of our nation means to wrestle with God, and that is the thing that gives me comfort. What about you?
Well, first of all, it's interesting because, as you know, we just read that parsha in the Torah, or you may or may not know, but it sounds like you're studying Torah. So we literally just read that portion about wrestling with God. So this is a very timely discussion. What I grapple with, and I do say that I have been in a massive crisis of faith, but it's not faith in God. It's faith in the universe and how it unfolds. I can accept to an extent that everything happens for a reason. And let's say that 1,200 people, so it's hard for me to even talk about this without like crying, were massacred in the most horrifying ways that a human mind could even possibly comprehend. And there's so many people, who are trying to make sense of this, right? Like, well, it was a wake up call for Israel that we need to come back together, or how resilient we are, or, name the litany of reasons. And I'm like, okay, but, did this baby Kathy beheaded and burned in its crib? Did this Holocaust survivor who already saw the most horrific things that a human being can endure be killed while on a respirator in their bed by being stabbed something like 100 times and shot in the head multiple times? So I love the concept of somebody might have been put on this earth to make us happy for one day. But why would anyone be put on this earth to come to such an end? And so I'm a generation older than you are. I think you're about 33, 34.
33, yeah, exactly, 33.
Okay, and I'm 53, so I'm old enough to be your very young mom. But I grew up like right in the shadow of the Holocaust, right? My parents were born in 42 and 44 respectively. My family, I'm blessed, are Americans since the 1800s. So we were not really in the pogroms, not in World War I, not in World War II. But it's funny. I'm interested to hear when did you find out about the Holocaust? Like, how old were you? Could you remember?
Here's my first memory of the Holocaust. I was very young, and it's embarrassing to say, but hopefully people will give me grace because I was so young. I remember being in the car in the back seat and my mom trying to decide if she should take me to the Holocaust Museum because if I was old enough. And I think I must have been like 6, something very young.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget this because she got so mad. She's trying to decide, and I'm 6, and all I want to do is I want to take part in what everyone is taking part in. And when you're a kid, you don't want to hear you're not old enough to do something. So when she said you're not old enough, I was like, well, why? And she said, there are some really graphic images there. And I was like, what does that mean? She's like, there are images of dead people. And my response, because I was trying to get her to think that I'm old enough to understand this, is I said, oh, that's so cool.
Okay, right.
And she stopped the car so fast and whipped her head around and just let loose. And it was emotional. And I
Sure.
get it, but it was like she was like, it is just let loose. Like, don't you dare. Like, now I know you're not old enough to go. In no way is this cool. Blah, blah. And I remember I was like, I couldn't articulate at the time, but what I was trying to do is show her that I could handle seeing images of dead people.
Sure.
But so starting from, I mean, I went to Hebrew school from when I was 2. Is when I started going to Hebrew daycare and stuff. So like it's been a part of my life and education from the time I was a young child.
Okay, yeah. Because I feel like there's a lot of discussion these days about what you said, like your mom is trying to grapple with, like, is he old enough? When I was a kid, I don't think that question existed. I don't remember ever not, literally, I do not remember ever not knowing about the Holocaust. And we had the books. Like you could flip it and see the naked dead people, and we were always reading I Never Saw Another Butterfly, which was a book of poems, and it was such a big part of our lives, that but at the same time we were a generation removed, right? So we did grow up in the why bad things happen to good people generation, right? The Kushner book that was like contemporary to my growing up. And so we grappled with it, but it was still very separate from our immediate experience. And so I I don't know that as much as we talked about it and learned about it and visited the museums, like I don't know that it ever made as much sense as 10/7 did
No,
about
no.
Like, because now we're talking about like Shani Loop, right? Now we're talking about like seeing it happen in real time as
Sure.
opposed to, yeah, these sort of like theoretical, we know what happened, we heard what happened, but we didn't see the videos.
You know what it is as well. We didn't see the we've seen videos, like we've seen videos of people dying, but like not not something that happened today. And I think the worst part is the part that really is even worse for our collective psyche is the people cheering it on.
100%.
Because it's not just if that happened and everybody came out and said this is disgusting, absolutely not, get the hostages back, like no unconditional ceasefire until these hostages come, like if there was just an overwhelming amount of people who just stood with us, I think it would have been easier to deal with. But not only do we have to worry about our hostages who are still there and see these horrific graphic images, we now have to battle for our right to exist with people here. And that's what makes the Holocaust so much more real, because for the first time in our lives, we're actually seeing, oh, this is how it happened. Like
Exactly.
this is how, and then recently in Amsterdam, we see Jews being hunted on the streets and people justifying it. It's like, it's not even just 10/7 now. And it's not just the response to 10/7. It's the increase in attacks. It's the increase in hatred and vitriol. That is what I think has led to such heightened levels of this.
It's not just the increase, it's the fact that it's become so normalized that governments are so here's something crazy because I do want to get into some okay, I have a million things I want to talk to you about in demographics that is also something I want to talk about because I'm in California, far left in Los
Oh,
Angeles.
wow. Oh, wow. I don't know.
Much redder, so I do want to get into some of that, but I agree with you about um on 10/7, as horrifying, and there aren't even words to describe like how horrifying it was, like they don't exist. As it was, these are terrorists and I expect terrorism from terrorists. I don't expect terrorism from literally the general public, and
Correct.
it has been heartbreaking, it's been enraging, it's been frustrating. It's been crazy making. If I had to choose one word, I would say crazy making. I'm like, what did you guys miss? Like they shot this themselves. They
Correct.
have 100 hostages, and they're like, oh, but 45. Like it all comes back to this one number, which, by the way, Andrew Fox had proved in his report this week are lies and inflations. But they don't even want to hear facts. And that's what's so frustrating. They want to hate. And so, okay, let me ask you this question because I have very, very strong opinions on this because I have very strong opinions on everything. Do you think that all the rage that's going on in our streets and, online and on our campuses, do you think this is about the war or about the Jews?
Uh, all the rage going on. Here's what I think. I think that number one, it hasn't happened in a vacuum. This has been happening for a long time, and I think we've been seeing it grow on college campuses specifically. We've been seeing this. Um, we've been seeing it growing and growing and growing, and it peaked and it sort of exploded out of the volcano on 10/7 and afterwards. I think what a lot of these videos have shown us, because many people have gone out and interviewed people at these events, they have no idea what's going on. They don't know. They couldn't point to Gaza on a map. They've never been there. I think the majority of people see horrific images of war,
Right.
and they don't like that, which I agree. I hate what happens in war, but
Everybody.
they've been misled through propaganda to believe that the Jews are at fault for this war. So now they don't like what they're seeing with war, and they think, okay, well, who's to blame? The Jews are to blame. And it has turned into the Jews are to blame for this, so the Jews are bad. And then they say Zionism, but number one, they can't define Zionism. They have no idea what it is. And it's another word for Jews. So I think it started off with, we're seeing horrific images of people being killed. Who's doing this? It's the Jews are bad. And
Right.
this, by the way, is the playbook of anti-Semitism from the very beginning of time. This is how they've gotten in many different ways to get people to hate Jews. It wasn't that Germans hated Jews. It was like, we've got an economic problem. Well,
Right.
who's causing the economic problem? The Jews. Right. It's like, and by the way, they don't say, well, Jews weren't allowed to have many jobs. Being a banker wasn't seen as a desirable job. So being a banker was one of the only jobs Jews could have. And then they'd be like, oh, well, look who controls the banks, Jews. It's like, so this is the playbook. They have a problem and they say, well, who's causing the problem? It's the Jews. And then they go after the Jews. So I think many people have actually been led down this carefully curated path of anti-Semitism based off of their actual good intuition. They're good. They don't want innocent people to die, and they've been misled to think that it's the Jews causing that.
Sure. So here's one of the, okay, again, like everything you're saying is bringing up like 100 points for me. Here's one thing is that everyone from the prime minister's office to the IDF to the Israeli politicians to the Israeli people to pro-Israel advocates such as you and I, all say the same thing. It is a horror to see what's happening in Gaza.
Yes.
The number of anti-Israel people who will admit that it is an actual horror, like beyond horror. There's war and then there's genocide.
Yes.
And that's a bigger conversation that I've had with so many people right now. I just want to talk. I'm really enjoying connecting with you. People don't understand what war is, first of all. But that they can't differentiate that from like barbaric torture, murder, massacre. I mean, the worst things on earth. It just shows like a complete failing of morality. It's funny that these people who are always putting my feet to the fire, like, what about the poor people of Gaza? I'm like, I've said a million times, and I 100% believe it. It is a tragedy. It is beyond tragedy. I can't stand watching the videos, but guess what? That blood is on Hamas's hands.
Correct.
But so here's what's interesting though. I can argue that since Israeli wars are really the only wars that people around the world can actually watch in real time, that's why the horrors of war stand out as being like so extraordinary. And by the way, they're not. It's war. This is what every war looks like, but people don't know it. But then I could go on the other side and say, well, the only reason that the Israeli wars are the only ones that are broadcast to the world is because it's the world's only Jewish state. And so it comes full circle. Yes, war is ugly. Yes, you haven't never seen war before. You didn't see the 500,000 people that Assad killed because where are the protests over this? These are the neighbors, right? These aren't randoms. But here's the thing. To me, personally, I do believe this is about anti-Semitism. And I do want to say, Jordan, that just a few years ago, I was talking about during the BLM stuff that there's a lot of anti-Semitism in this country. I've been in this fight for a very long time. Again, I'm much older than you are. But that this is, I would never have called America an anti-Semitic nation. Never. I saw it as random pockets. They exist everywhere. Now what I see, I mean, I know there's a silent majority, but silence is complicity. There's so few of us speaking up. And as I like watch myself, but like right now, like the world is engulfing itself in Jew hatred. And what I'm noticing personally is this like dangerous inverse phenomenon that the more the war quiets down, because it's been winding down for quite a long time now, the more violent and aggressive the anti-Semites are getting. So, like at this point, I sadly do believe this war was nothing more than an opportune excuse to globalize anti-Semitism, really to globalize the Intifada. And at this point, seeing how this war is turning out, I have very little concern about Israel's ability to defend itself at this point. I mean, they've
Oh my gosh.
beyond the shadow of a
Oh
doubt.
my
They,
gosh. It has been like the beepers. Are you kidding me? I
yeah,
can't wait for the book to come out about that. Like I cannot wait for the book to come out. That was absolute just there's no word to describe the genius. Like, is unbelievable.
it is. And it was, they say it was about 3 years in the making to take over like a whole entire supply channel and supply and shell companies. And and to have it at the time that it happened to coincide
Oh
with
my gosh.
it, it is beyond belief. And it's almost as equally extraordinary as the intelligence breakdown of 10/7 was extraordinary. Um, but I think that Israel like has finally reached wits end and they're done. They're like,
Yeah.
look what they're doing in Syria. They're like, don't even think about like just don't
Correct.
think about it.
Correct.
Like my only real concern about Israel right now is that they're going to concede to a ceasefire before establishing complete victory and getting all 100 hostages need to come home.
Correct.
Not just the women, not just the children, not just the elderly. If this were your son, you would want
Correct.
him home, and his life is just as important as
Correct.
the female soldiers. Yes, he can't get pregnant, but I'm sure I
He's an
have
innocent human.
there.
Bring he should never have been taken. None of them should have been taken. And no one should have been killed on 10/7. It's not a it's not a crazy thing to say. It shouldn't be a difficult thing to say. No one should have died on 10/7. That shouldn't it just shouldn't have happened.
Right. But all 100 hostages need to come home. And Israel, as far as I'm concerned, should not accept
And
anything.
and you know who's been saying that just outright in the most amazing way is Donald Trump. He's
Yes.
like he has come out with such a firm he's like if they're not back by January 20th, there will be hell to pay. And
Sure.
I do wonder what would have happened if Biden took that stance from day one. If they're not back in a day,
Right.
then there will be hell to pay. Like
He,
how many could have been saved? Like
exactly.
like all of the I mean, how
He's
many
the
could have
only,
been saved?
he's the only person on earth who could have ended this war.
Correct.
One. Okay. We're running out of time really quickly. Okay, let's make this point pretty short. I don't need you to tell me who you voted for. Where are you on the political spectrum of left to right?
The truth is I have beliefs on both sides, right? I'm very pro Second Amendment. I'm also I am pro choice up to a point. Like I don't think it should be late term abortions, but like I am pro choice. And so I tend to be more independent realistically. What I've found in recent years is that the left has been going so far left that that people would say I'm very Republican, that I'm very right, but I actually think I'm pretty center realistically, and it just the distance that the left has gone has made me appear more right.
100%. Was Israel your number one voting issue this past election?
Um, that's a really good question.
So no. If it's a really good question, the answer is it wasn't your number one, but it was a top three.
Well, here's the thing: I'm not a one issue voter.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not a one issue. Israel was a very important thing for me, but it wasn't the only reason why I chose the candidate that I chose. It was that would definitely played a big part in it for sure. Yes, because the way I look at it is this: when I'm voting based on Israel, it's not just Israel.
Right.
Israel is the only democracy in that area of the world. And Israel, people don't realize this. Like, we get so much intelligence from Israel. Israel is one of the only reasons that we had, never mind technology, all this stuff. Like, so much of our national security depends on Israel. So it like, and if you really look at and speak to people, whether in any government, whether it's the Israeli government or the American government or the Israeli military, American military, we share and we both depend on one another. And while a lot of finances, well, America does help Israel financially. Israel helps America from the security perspective. The Iron Dome was developed in Israel. David Sling, the arrow system, like, you better believe America has these things because of Israel.
Yes. People do not realize, A, America needs Israel as much as Israel needs America, just as you said, but B, that 75 to 85% of all defense aid, and by the way, all aid that goes to Israel from America, all of it is for military defense, and 75 to 85% has to be spent in America, which means it's creating American jobs, it's helping American tech, it's
Correct.
helping our economy. But people, like, if people see them because they're so tiny as, like, depending on America. It's definitely a codependent relationship. um I have been a registered independent since at least the first Obama term. I did vote for him the first time. That's when the left lost me, and it was over Israel. Now it's over 100 different things. I used to consider myself pretty far left, and now I'm definitely right of center. Most people think I am like some sort of hardcore Republican, but here's what's interesting. Like, on Facebook, I actually basically said at one point, like, knowing that I am pro-choice, pro-gun control, pro-equal rights for literally every single human being, and pro-Israel, I want to know why Democrats would assume that means I'm voting for Trump.
Correct. Correct.
And so they defend the Biden-Harris administration as being so pro-Israel. Well, if they were pro-Israel, why would you assume that just
Exactly.
one issue that's different from you, that I'm voting against this candidate?
Do
So,
you are you pro Second Amendment?
Second Amendment meaning the
Guns. Like, do you think people have the right to bear arms?
do I think that we do because we do. I believe in, here's what I believe, Jordan. I don't believe in toy guns. Like, I believe in no guns, but because we have guns, I believe everyone should be able to have a gun. Do I want a gun? No. Did my
So you
best?
don't you don't have any guns to protect yourself?
Yeah. No,
Really?
I would never trust myself with a gun. And let me say that, as vocal as I am for Israel, I don't fear for my life at all. But I don't trust myself with a gun, because I am like the worst person on earth in an emergency situation. I just get
To be
hysterical.
fair, like, I love the objectivity. I It's funny, my mom has been anti-gun my whole life. That was just the house that I grew up in. But after all this, like, for the first time, she was like, I think I need to get a gun. And just because got a mezuzah on the door. It's like openly Jewish. People know. And I'm very, like, from a, like, the way I look at it is, if you understand history and you understand how governments work and how people work, listen, and I think the world would be better if there were no guns, but we don't live in that world. So since that's the world we live in, I think everyone should have that right to be able to protect themselves and their family. I do also think, for you to be so objectively aware that in an emergency situation you're not good, so to not even have that there is a probably a really good thing. I do hope you have some type of bear spray or like pepper gel, because that is also super helpful in a difficult situation.
Okay. Sorry, it's 10 till. Let me talk really briefly about Dallas versus Los Angeles. And by
Let's
the
do
way,
it.
it makes me very sad that in 2024, almost 2025, we even have to have a conversation where you say that because your mom has a mezuzah that she has to fear for her life. Like if people don't understand the problem that this point even has to be raised is the problem itself.
Correct. Agreed. 100%.
Yeah. So Dallas, what's going on in Dallas?
We love it here. There's a really wonderful Jewish community. Our synagogue has we have a great synagogue, and they have all the pictures of the hostages. They have a big yard, so they have all the pictures of the hostages right out front. Um, Unfortunately, our major concern is security, which they do an incredible job with. But like whether wherever we are, wherever like because we are very highly involved in the Jewish community here, the number one thing is security. I was literally just on a call the other night with like a parent volunteer group around the security and organizing who will be the security here and when. And in addition to have like a huge portion of synagogues and schools, a huge portion of the money goes towards security and protecting our community. So we do love it. We think it's great. It's very supportive here. It's a great strong knit community. But yeah, what about Los Angeles? What's that like?
Uh, a new report just came out yesterday that anti-Semitic violence in Los Angeles is up 450% since 10/7. I can actually see the Israeli consulate building from my window,
Oh wow.
which, by the way, has been repeatedly vandalized. I'm 1 mile from the federal building, which is where all of the protests come, and 1.5 miles from UCLA. And everybody's heard about UCLA. So I have the number of days where I get this PTSD of just having the helicopters overhead all the time because they were shutting down the streets so much because of these massive marches going through like my neighborhood. And it's been very, very anxiety producing. We had to move our rallies, our Jewish rallies, from the federal building to Beverly Hills. I don't know if you know, Beverly Hills is actually the only majority Jewish major city in America. The whole city council is Jewish. The police are amazing. We've never had a single counter protester.
Oh wow.
But here's like, if I were to sum it all up, and I know we're running out of time, so let me sum it all up. We had a town hall meeting with Mayor Bass and the LAPD about the anti-Semitism crisis. And their message to us, Jordan, I hope it blows your mind as much as it blew my mind, was we cannot protect you. You need to learn to protect yourselves.
I,
This is
I'm
this is
I'm
the
not
police
surprised.
department.
As honest, to be very honest with you, that is the least surprising. Like it unfortunately doesn't blow my mind because this is history repeating itself over and over and over again. Like, and by the way, this is a pro Second Amendment advocate speech. Like what you just said, like that's you can't depend on anybody else, even the police. And by the way, it's like this is why we need the Second Amendment because you can't depend on them.
You're not an open carry state, and or all the I don't even know the words, but
So
like that applies to
you're not a constitutional carry. You're not allowed to just carry it without a license. But it would be against the Constitution to not be allowed to own a gun. So you can own one and you can get a license to carry it. But the hoops they make you jump through are a little bit more difficult. But the point is, you should never ever depend on your government to protect you. That's just never going to happen.
I think that's fair to say that we should never depend on anyone, but we should be able to. I think it's their job, and for them to tell us flat out that they're not going to. And by the way, they haven't. I mean, made international news that there were these anti-Israel protesters in front of a synagogue, and the police were protecting the protesters instead of the Jews who were trying to get into their own synagogue. I mean, this is how backwards and screwed up things have become.
That's where forever it's worth, as horrific and terrible as that is, I'm just not surprised.
Yeah.
This is history repeating itself over and over, and it's terrible. I agree, and it shouldn't happen. But that's the world that we live in, and that's the world that our ancestors have lived in. And so for me, it's like, all right, cool. We've seen this happen over and over and over. So why the fuck are we expecting it to be different? We should learn. I have a colleague here who's an Orthodox Jew who literally spends his free time teaching Jews how to protect themselves, how to learn how to use firearms, learn how to use them properly. It's like, why do we continue to trust a group of people who, as you said, openly tell us we will not protect you? So why the fuck are we surprised when they don't?
So here's why, Jordan. Particularly, and again, could you give me
Yeah,
10?
go.
Okay, because I want to talk about you're in the fitness industry. I'm in the yoga industry there, but they're both fitness, but I'm willing to bet very different demographics. So I live in the world of love and light. I put that in quotes because they have been horrifically, like even the
Yeah,
love and light crew are saying things to me that you could not pay me to say to another human being.
yeah, I believe it.
So so maybe I'm coming from a different place, but everyone in my world, and I live in Brentwood. I'm very close to Santa Monica, probably the most liberal city in America. Um, Everything here is about tolerance and peace and love. And so this is why I expect more. I expect more because after George Floyd, the world rushed to say, how quickly can we right this wrong? And we're talking about one person.
Yep.
After 1,200 Jews are slaughtered, instead of saying, how can we right this wrong? The response was, yes, it's their fault. Let's kill them more. I'm sorry, but in this world that has taken such a far left where everyone is okay, that microaggressions are like if you call someone by the wrong pronoun. And by the way, you laugh. I have lost jobs here in LA for calling someone by the wrong pronoun. And yet it's okay for them to tell me to go die because I am a baby killer, because my nation wants to defend itself from bloodthirsty terrorists that seek our annihilation from every border, and now they are inside our borders. And I am shocked. I am shocked that in this environment of tolerance, that this would have a chance to fester, other than I think that people have been painted so hard into this tolerance corner that they maybe have been looking for an outlet for intolerance, because we all have it to some extent, right? There's always something that just doesn't sit well with us. But in this environment, you're not allowed to talk about those things.
So
But now,
I'm
yeah,
intrigued, and don't worry about the time. Don't worry about the time.
okay.
I'm intrigued. On one hand, you say you're shocked about them saying they're not going to protect you. On the other, and you say, there are people here who want to kill us and all this stuff. But on the other hand, you say you're not worried for your safety. What is going on here? You have that doesn't make sense.
I think it's I think that it would be narcissistic to believe that I'm that important, that anybody cares enough about Shana Meyerson, a yoga instructor in Brentwood who really loves Israel.
Okay.
And
So you
I
think like your own no, you're not worried that someone's targeting you specifically, but as a greater whole, as just because you're Jewish, like you have just as much of a chance of being targeted just because you're Jewish as anybody.
so I guess, Jordan, like the way that I look at it, you and I are soldiers in this war, but in a different way. Right? I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
we're fighting a battle, and my brethren, our brethren, are literally risking and giving up their lives for this fight.
Yep.
I feel like my part in this is so small that if someone and also, Jordan, I'm a woman, so I maybe this is naive. I think that people may be a little gentler with a woman than a man. I can't see anybody, even though like the vitriol comes through online in the most disgusting and disturbing ways. Um, I see my fight as so small and not dangerous compared to the fights of other people. But if God forbid, I wound up being a victim of some sort of anti-Semitic attack, then that I guess let's circle back to what you first said about
my
like,
my thing is like this is the thought process that Jews had in Eastern Europe. Oh, it's not going to happen to us. It's not going to happen to us. It's not going to happen to us. And the like the battles and the wars that our soldiers are fighting in Lebanon and in Gaza and in Syria and all over the world, like that's a very real battle. I was just talking to my sister in Israel about this yesterday. So it's actually one of the little girls who cheered because I'm not kosher. Now they're my family. I was the best man at one of their weddings. Like I call them my sister.
okay,
Um, it's where everyone is fighting some kind of a battle, and obviously it's very different when you got Kevlar on and you're going into an actual war zone. But for me, it's interesting to hear someone who gets rightfully upset that the government won't protect us, and they openly say it, but then also in the same breath will say, I'm not worried about my safety. And like it doesn't, that to me sounds like two things that go in exact contradiction of one another. And for me, so my buddy I was telling you about who takes people to the gun range and teaches them how to do it, he's an Orthodox Jew. He has t-shirts that say Jews with ARs don't get in cattle cars. And like I love it. And I think it if we really want to help our people, and not because our role here is to bring light to the world, to bring God's light to the world. That's what we're supposed to do. We can't do that if we're not here. If we're gone, we can't bring light to this world. And I think in the same way with fitness, my job is to empower people to learn how to do it on their own, to learn how to take their own fitness and their own health into their hands. We need to stop. Like, I don't think people should depend on the government for their health. I don't think people should depend on the government to teach them how to be fit and healthy, how to exercise, how to eat right. In an ideal world, I would love it if I could guarantee the government could protect me. But history shows me that's not going to happen. And I think it is every person's responsibility. And on this podcast, in this conversation, every Jew's responsibility to learn how to protect yourself, because God forbid if that happens, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And right now I see too many of our people gardening in a war, and they are not taking their own self-preservation seriously. That's just my opinion.
okay. I'm literally when we end this, I'm gonna look into self-defense and including like sprays or whatever. I
Good. And I'm
know
happy to help.
my thing. Okay, we'll talk about that because we also, I mean, listen, every city now has the Orthodox Jews who are training other Jews, as well as, of course, Krav Maga, right, which is a big thing right now too. I guess that when I'm out in public, and by the way, I literally am never in public without, whether it's a hostage shirt, my necklace, my ribbon. I have my 10-7 bracelet. When I wear my braids, which are my signature like thing on YouTube, I always have yellow ribbons on the end of them for those who know. And but I'm in public. Like I can't see, like I know what you're gonna say, but I can't see somebody coming up to me in Whole Foods Market and like
You're
knocking me.
you're crazy. You're crazy. That's delusional. You've seen the videos online. Jews have been hunted all over the world. Literally, you told me in your county anti-Semitism is up over 400%. Like it takes one person, and just one person with one incident. And by the way, how many times has that place been vandalized that you can see from your fucking window? I pray that you are never attacked, and I pray that you never get hurt. But and by the way, it's not just for you. What if you see something happening?
Right.
What if you see something and it's like same thing with CPR?
Sure.
I think it is one of the most ridiculous things that not every single person takes a CPR course every year because we all think it's not going to happen to us. And then what if you're in a restaurant, never mind you or a loved one, what if someone at a table, couple tables over starts choking and no one knows how to do CPR? No one knows how to do the Heimlich maneuver. Like, are you serious? What the fuck is going on? Like every single person should know how to put a tourniquet on. God forbid. These things save lives. It is outrageous to me that people, especially in the fitness industry, who focus so much on health and who focus so much on living a long life, don't learn basic first aid, don't learn basic self-defense. Like, what the fuck? That is crazy to me. Did 10-7 teach you nothing? Like, what is going on?
Okay, you're winning this argument. I concede. I concede. I always feel like, I mean, we enter, like, I go to synagogue on Saturdays, not just the last 3 weeks. That's just when I've been trying to be like more like observant, but I've been going at least since 10-7 and sporadically before then. But like we've got armed guards all over our synagogue, which
Amazing.
it is, and it's sad. Jordan, whenever I go to Israel, like, and you know this, every airport that has flights to Israel has a separate security for no other nation has this. No other nation needs a separate security in order to get on the plane. Now, yes, it makes me feel good and safe and all the things, but it also every time I want to cry
Yep.
that we have to have an extra level of security.
You know what's funny?
Yeah,
This is where like your your liberalism comes out here, by the way. Like this is like you're like anyone who can hear you talk and be like you're a liberal. You
yeah,
are. Like you have this idealistic, just like, oh, like it shouldn't be this way. And I'm the same way. It shouldn't be this way. But let's be realistic. It is. So now what do we do?
right.
We got it. Like we can't base everything off of what it should be. It's yeah, it sucks. It
Yeah,
absolutely sucks that it's the way that it is. Also, every school, as I'm sure you know, in Israel is gated. Every school, public school, gated. They've got a guard out front. Parents can't just walk right in. All the schools in Israel, everyone like. And by the way, they have, especially since 10-7, but even before that, citizens are allowed to have weapons. They don't have school shootings.
no, but here, so more than Israel, like, so the thing that always amazes me is like, I'm sure you have too. It sounds like you've traveled a lot. I've been around Europe a lot, and I always call it like sort of like the Holocaust tour of Europe. And you realize when you're there that this was not a German thing. The whole, I mean, really the whole world, but definitely that whole continent turned on the Jews. Nonetheless, you go to any city and one of the biggest attractions, right, is to look at the churches, right? I mean, they are breathtaking. You go to Paris, you go to Notre Dame. I mean, I could spend days just marveling at Notre Dame, or the Sagrada Familia Sagrada or whatever it is in Barcelona, however you say it. And yet, every synagogue, no matter how big or how small in Europe, you can't walk into a synagogue. There are guards, not just with guns, but with machine guns outside of every single synagogue, wherein you could walk right into any church.
Yeah. And if it wasn't like that, we wouldn't exist. I literally, I was just telling you at that
You
we was
mean
at
in
a
diaspora?
yeah, we wouldn't exist in the day. We would be dead.
Right.
I was at the meeting for this like a community security thing that I was at the other night, and they showed us a video of this guy in Germany who was trying to break into a synagogue, shooting a shotgun at it, throwing grenades, trying to get in, and he couldn't get in because they had reinforced doors, reinforced. They had security guards around. It's like, thank God we've learned that we need to be able to protect ourselves because no one else will.
Mhm.
It's one of the most demoralizing and hurtful things to say the least. But I think for such an intelligent group of people and such a small group of people, it's still bewildering to me how many of us don't take our own security into our own hands. And by the way, that's one of the great things about the state of Israel is like we can depend on the government there. They subsidize funding to make sure every house has a safe room, to make sure that like parks and all this stuff have safe rooms, have safe areas wherever you go. Should it have to be like that? Of course not. It shouldn't in an ideal world, but it is. And so we that's the great thing about not just for Jews living in Israel, but especially for Jews living in Israel. They know that their government will take care of them, and they know that they won't turn on them, and they know that they will protect them, and the Arabs know it too, and the Christians know it too, that they'll all protect them, that everyone will be safe. But especially when we're in the diaspora, it's like if you depend on the government or you think they will protect you, that is the most blatant disregard for history that you could ever imagine.
Yeah. And every time the funny thing is I wear my ribbon and stuff, even when I'm just shooting videos, right? Like I can create content every day. But when I leave my house, I am very self-conscious of it. But at the same time, like I cannot give in to the haters. Like this is what I represent. And so I have to be proud and strong and in their face if they need it, saying, it's funny, I have a blue ribbon instead of a yellow ribbon, because A, my temple handed them out before the yellow ribbon became a thing. But B, I'm like, yes, it is for the hostages, but it's also for Israel, and it's also against anti-Semitism. It's all the things. And
Yeah.
if you want to ask me, not you, if anyone wants to ask me, I'm happy to have this conversation. But the thing that I worry about the most, and again, I probably shouldn't be saying this on air, but I do the Santa Monica stairs once a week, right? And I do sometimes think that somebody might just push me down, it's 200 stairs, because I have this ribbon on. That's the only place that it ever really occurs to me that I might be like risking my life. It'd be so easy for someone to nonchalantly trip me down the stairs, but there's nothing I'd be able to do about that. Let me ask you, Jordan, though, fitness industry, you work with everyone from like super bodybuilders to, people who are just introducing themselves to fitness. So it's basically a broad swath of the whole world. But what kind of reactions anti-Semitic, let's focus on like anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish or philo-Semitic pro-Israel, on balance, do you see from your community? Now, we're all going to get the random hate bots and just hate mongers who just go out of their way to find anything with the word Israel on it just to say mean things. But we know who our people are, who our regular followers are, etc. So what do you hear more than anything from your people, your like inner circle, etc.?
Yeah, and by the way, this will have to be the last question that I can answer. I'm gonna have to hop off, but um, it's now well over a year after 10/7. I think I've lost a lot of people who are just against us. So now the majority of what I get is very supportive. People asking, how's my family in Israel? How are my friends in Israel? People asking about that. There are a significant number of people asking what books should they read? Where can they educate themselves? Which is one of the reasons why I've been doing podcasts around it and discussing it. So it's been a lot of people wanting to educate, and I've been getting some really wonderful questions like how do I let my Jewish friends know that I stand with them, and how do I make them feel comfortable during this Hanukkah is a question I've been getting. So it's been honestly really great. I would say the the more that those come in at a decent clip, but I've got a pretty big audience, um, and the more concerning thing for me, not surprising, but concerning, is that for the number of followers that I have, and for the even number of people who I had considered very close friends, the silence is deafening. It's it's not, I'm not worried. I'm not like, I am worried about the loud aggression against us, but I'm equally worried about the deafening silence across the board. And I don't hold it against them from the perspective of like maybe they don't feel educated, whatever it is, but these are the people who, when they did have a course on the Holocaust, they thought, how could nobody have spoken up? How, like, I would have been the person to do the right thing. And it's the overwhelming silence of people who I consider to be very close to me, who haven't once said anything that lets me know it can happen again. Because as long as people remain silent, then it can happen over and over and over.
I agree with you, and it's left me a lot of my closest friends in the world have quietly slipped out of my life, and it makes you wonder, you know, what thoughts they haven't told me in words. They just stopped talking to me. I've talked about best friends of 30 or more years gone.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what are you believing that you don't even feel like you? Because I always tell people, you have a problem with Israel, talk to me about it. Let's talk it out. I will give you facts. We can discuss it, but don't just accept everything that you hear, hook, line, and sinker. Okay, Jordan, you've been so generous with your time. Do you have anything else that you want to add? And I always prefer to end on a high note. Where's the hope? Where do you see the
I
light?
mean, where I see the hope, where I see the light is I don't know the number off the top of my head, but there have been many hundreds, if not thousands, of babies that have been born in Israel since 10/7, which to me is just like one of the most amazing things. Like to focus on how our numbers are still growing. There's still hope. I have many Muslim friends who are in support of Israel because they know what Israel stands for. Many Christian friends, and our president elect and his administration has shown time and again that they stand with Israel, regardless of your feelings towards him, and I would say how he speaks. I would say that as a Jew, I feel very, very comforted to know that he'll be coming into office relative to the current administration. So I think, and also there are other things where, like, as every time I see an innocent person who's been killed, it's terrifying and horrific and deeply saddening and depressing. And then also seeing in the same breath that they were able to donate various of their organs to save someone who was on life support, to a child, or to someone who was going to die if it wasn't for them, which brings me back to this wrestling with God and understanding everything does happen for a reason. Maybe they were here for that purpose. Who knows? Only God knows. And I think just the fact that we have the state of Israel, just the fact that we're able to have these conversations like with you and I are having right now, the fact that people can listen to this right now, that we have the freedom and the ability to express who we are and to defend who we are is a miracle. And the fact that we can even be thinking about moving and making aliyah is if we think about the state of Israel on the timeline of the world, it's a teeny tiny blip on the radar that we are blessed enough to be living in. And so there's a tremendous amount of light. And I think, yes, we can work to fix the darkness, but we fix the darkness by lighting the light.
Wow, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Jordan. This has been amazing to have this conversation. I'm so glad we had this chance to connect. And I hope that we could continue this conversation at some point, whether it's online or offline.
Absolutely. Thank you.